Okay, we're just quickly reviewing a little bit of the basics of joins and the working with multiple tables in one-to-many relationship, right? So we see that if we have separate tables but they're related, then we can do things like inner join. As I said a moment ago, whichever one I put first doesn't really matter at this stage, but I usually mention, you know, I kind of start at one end, especially if there's 3 or more in a row, then it makes sense to start at one end and work your way through. And then I usually like to put the on the next line, but it doesn't really matter. And then we define the primary and foreign key. Now, following our naming conventions, this is a review point for us. Usually the name of the fields is the same, right? That's what we normally do, is we use the same name in the child table as the primary key is in the parent table. So it's really important to avoid ambiguity to use the table names here as well, right? So department, and thank goodness you're here. Well, I don't know why I got that, but anyway. Dot will give me my IntelliSense, right? So I can get the field I want out of the table. So department code equals the employee dot and department code as well, right? So that's the primary to foreign key relationship that is based on. And just this will remind us why I don't normally ever do a select star when you have multiple tables. If we look closely at the data below, one of the things we'll see is it's zoomed in too much. Department code is here twice, right, in the output, because there's 2 copies of it, in a sense you might say. There's the one that lives in the department table and the one that is the foreign key in the employee table, right? So we don't need it in the output twice, right? So normally I wouldn't do a select star just for that very reason alone. You're better off to actually name what it is you're actually after, right? And that's where ambiguity comes in as well, because if I put department code in here, if I try to run this, I will get, it's even underlining it already, that ambiguous column, right? Because I have to say, okay, I know that they're the same on both sides of the relationship by definition, but still I have to tell the system which one it is I want to actually pull the data from to appear here. So department dot, right? And then now that should run without errors or complaining, and I just see all the department code. Now, of course, I see duplication here, but don't be thrown, because really what we're doing is we're asking for every employee, give me this information, right? So it's not the primary key in that sense, it's the foreign key values we're actually seeing. But anyway, let's get on to our new subject matter, group by and having, because you know, it's obvious that often there's groups within any set of data, right? There's things you could group by. Even if I went back for a second, I guess my thing comes up to it. So this is a review point. Where do I put that built-in function anyway? Well, we often use those aggregate functions in the select line to actually show the result of applying those functions, but also they can be used in the where line, right? Because sometimes we'll check that, you know, for a Boolean expression is true or false, and that it might involve using the aggregate function right in our comparison that we're doing there as well. Sorry, I forgot this slide was in here, but it's a good point to review. Okay. All right. So the built-in functions basically work that we have a column, it's treated as one unit. When the where clause is used, instead of dealing with all rows, how it works is each row becomes sort of a candidate. Is this going to be included in the output or not? And whatever Boolean expression, true or false expression we put in our where clause, it'll examine each candidate row and see, okay, this passes true, so it gets put into the output, right? So when a where criteria is used, just the matching values are assessed by the built-in function as well. So if I ask for an average, okay, maybe that's a good example to do. Let me get back to my, right? I'm just going to focus on the employee table for a second here. Okay, so we have all of our employees, but we notice even without bringing in the department table, right, that there's some repetition here that I see department codes. If I just keep it simple for now and just focus on this, we can see that there's, how many employees work in the accounting department? Well, there's 3, I can see them, right? But if this was hundreds and hundreds of records long, I wouldn't want to manually have to go down and try and count them all, would I, right? So that's where things like group by comes in. So for example, right? To try and answer that very question. If I went select, and I want to say count, right? There you go, just do my count star. Sorry, I've got caps lock on, so everything's coming up looking weird and wonderful. I'll just leave them in caps because they are commands.
Well, why are we bracketing the star again?
Well, with count, it's a function, so you always have to say what it is you're counting. I could count employee number as a field, for example. Okay. I'm really messing myself here. Okay, EMP, darn caps lock. Okay. Right. Now, if I do this right now, the result should not be surprising. There's 8 employees. So if I'm counting employee number, that's why I count star. It really just means count the records that are in the output. Right? I get 8. Okay. But we know, based on our just select star from employee, that okay, there's some in some department, some in another. Right. So if I wanted to know how many were in, for example, the accounting department, right, I could use a where clause, where I don't have to worry about ambiguity because I only have one table, employees, so department code equals, right? And then I could change my alias here, so instead of saying no column name, it could say number of employees in the accounting department, right? Fair enough, okay? But you know, maybe I want to show the name of the department beside that count, right? Of course, that's not going to work unless I put delimiter of some sort. Square brackets work, right? Yeah, that would be fine. I could do that. Number of employees in accounting, 3, right?
You don't have to use that.
Oh, well, I'm supposed to, but no, it's smart enough to, just like JavaScript, you're supposed to put a semicolon at the end of the line, but if you don't, it'll still work.
Sometimes.
Usually. Okay. So that seems to be working, right? Okay, that's good. But what about in the row? What if I wanted to show the name of the department or the department code there? Because maybe I want to change my where clause for a different department, but I don't want to have to keep changing this label every time, right? Well, that's where well, maybe I want to show the department name. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. But you know, the department code is going to, I want to show the full name of the department. So in that case, I do need my inner join. I'm just going to steal this, because once you write this once, you get it working, you can reuse it. I'm going to add that to the from clause. I guess I really do need to spell it. Okay. Right? So if I want to have the department name and the number, okay, if I go to run this, oh, here's an informative message, right? As I've said before, don't be afraid of these when they come up. Say, oh, good, I'm getting valuable feedback. Column, department name is invalid in the select list because it does not contain either an aggregate function or a group by. In other words, I can't have anything in the projection if I'm using even a single aggregate function, min, max, count, average, nothing else, unless I say I'm grouping by this piece of information. And that kind of makes sense when you think about it. Let me just go back here to look at all the employees again. Right? No, go away. Ah! Trying to hit F5, but I keep hitting something else. Right? So, if I want to count, okay, and see for just the accounting department, I want to count how many employees there are, but I want that name to show up as well. It just doesn't know what to do because essentially there's only one of these, and yet I'm trying to count across a group. So really all I have to do is add group by. group by department name. So when I finish explaining here, I'm going to repeat myself a few times. Oh, of course, it's ambiguous there because I have them in both. Okay.
Why do you have a dot in front of your employee?
Oh, I didn't mean to.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. So basically the bottom line is this. If you have anything in the projection, in the select clause itself, that is not an aggregate function, then all we do is we put it in the group by. If I execute this, then what I'll see is the department name accounting, number of employees 3. Now if I take out the where clause, for example, right? I don't want to filter it for one department. Now it'll group each department, right? And show me in accounting I have 3 employees, in information systems I have 4, and in marketing I have 1. Okay? So that's really what group by is for. It allows us to summarize data not just across the entire set, but by groups within the set itself. So we have a whole list of employees, and I was fine doing a count star of employees, sure, and that told me the total number. But if I want it broken down in subgroups, because I have separate groups in different departments, obviously, then I can just use the group by clause to include information in the output, okay, that isn't an aggregate function. I can keep on going. Say I wanted to show the department budget as well. Right? Watch what happens. I get a nice red message because, again, department budget is invalid in the select list. It's the same message because it is not an aggregate function or part of the group by clause. Right? So to include the budget in the output, all I do is I come down here and add it to the group by clause. Department budget. And now, once again, I'm allowed to group by the department as a logical entity, right? And show this information for each member in that group, okay? As well as this aggregate function, the number of employees in that group. So we could keep building on this. We can add another aggregate function just for the fun of it. Maybe because I'm getting too wide when I zoom in on the screen here, I'm going to start putting these on separate lines, right? And I'll just put a comma. And let's add something else here in analysis. Well, why don't we see what the total salary is, right? Because if we're grouping by department, then we're going to get, again, the records included in each row will be grouped by department, so I'll see the total salary in each department. So to get the total, what aggregate function do I use? How do you add things up? Which aggregate function? Sum, exactly. So I'll use the sum function of the EMP salary as total salary burden. I like that word. You know, when my grandkids come to me and ask for a quarter, I say, "Oh, this is part of your allowance burden," you know. I'm only kidding. I don't say that. But, okay, total salary for department. Well, I'll just leave it as total salary. Right? So if we execute this query now, what do we see? We see now that each name and the budget for each department, how many employees are in the department, and the total salary of all the employees again for the department. Right? So that's the power of group by. It allows us to really do some analysis on the data. Okay? So we could keep on going with this. We could start calculating, oh, wow, you know what? That's our budget. This is the total amount of salary. How much room is left over? Right? You can, you know, your mind starts thinking about, wow, this is a useful tool. I can see how business people like to use this kind of thing to ask questions of their data. Start doing some analysis, right? But I think I'll pause there for a second and go back to the PowerPoint for a moment. Right? So, So the point here was that when we use a filter, right, then we just execute our aggregate function on the rows that are included in the output. And it's very much the same idea when we come to grouping, right? So looking for groups in data, okay, this is the same example we just had up on the screen. We can see repeated values. If I'd ordered it by the department code employee, it would have looked this way as well, right? Another thing we could do is employee title, because there's some repetition there, isn't there? Okay. So just as another example, we could start counting how many people are programmers and how many people are managers and things like that. Maybe we'll do that. Why not? Okay, so I'll leave that one alone. We'll come down here. Now that example is still just working with the employee table, but yeah, I guess we will. Okay, so we'll select I want to show the employee name. No, I don't. I want to just count how many are in, say, I have a given job title, right? So I want to show the job title, EMP title. And we'll just count how many employees have the same job title, right? Count. I don't need my join because I'm just going to do this on the employee table. Now, in order to group by the job title, group by employee title. So now I see each title listed with a count of how many people have that job title, right? I should have done an alias here as number of people with same job title. How can I put that shortly? Number with same title, with same job. Okay, just for a little bit more explanatory column heading, right? So I see all the jobs. And of course, they aren't. Are they in alphabetical order? Darn, they are. Group by tends to kind of do that, although it doesn't necessarily always do it. I was going to put a order by, but anyway. We could order by the number with the same job. So we'll put it descending. Now, order by is the only one of the clauses here that will actually take an alias and treat it like it's the column, right? So I can say order by my entire alias descending.
Did you have to put an alias for it to work?
No, I could have said order by count star, right?
You just said order by descent?
No,
Why not?
because I have to say which field I'm ordering by. Descending is just an.
Oh, you put the exact titles.
Yeah, I put whatever I gave here, I put here. If I didn't have an alias, I'd actually put this expression, right? I could have done that instead. I could have just said order by the count star descending. That'll give me the exact same results, right? So the job titles with the most employees are at the top, okay? And away we go. And if I want it alphabetically by the employee title afterwards, watch, does anything change? No. Darn. But
Still works.
I know that it works, right? So now if there's a whole bunch here, they're in alphabetical order within that group, right? So that's another example of using group by even with a single table, right? And we can group by any field where there's any repetition whatsoever. Okay? So that's usually what it comes down to, is finding that repetition. Okay.
Well, if you do put that, it did change. My results are different
Without the order by?
the order by for
Okay. Well, the order by is always a good, that guarantees it's going to be a given order. Group by, sometimes it'll be one way, sometimes it'll be another way. I could give you a long explanation of why that is, but I don't want to bore you to death. Basically, it's about the query plan. It'll come up with a query plan that'll decide which order it'll do certain operations and what indexes it might use to help it accomplish its task. And that can change all the time depending on statistics on the table and so on. So that's why it doesn't always come out the same unless you force it to be the same. All right. So anything that needs grouping, you'll find the same symptoms show up. So you can play doctor here, right, and analyze a query to say, oh, is this going to need a group by or not? Right, just by looking at the select clause. And basically, as I said earlier, if there are any aggregate functions used in the projection, in the first select clause itself, right, and something that isn't, then you know you're going to have a group by. What do you put in the group by? Basically everything mentioned here that isn't an aggregate function. And really it's usually just as simple as that. Right?
In the same order, right? Or in any order?
It doesn't really matter, the order. Did you mean the comma separated order that you mentioned them in the group by? Yeah, no, it doesn't matter. Okay, so the select line is really a guide then, right? So basically we do usually match the group by line with anything that's not an aggregate function from the select. And you know, I don't know why, but students often, until they understand this one slide, they have a hard time using group by and knowing when and how to use it. But it really is as simple as that. So if you take one nugget away from today, okay, I hope that it's this. All right, so just a visual here of how to work. So we can do minimums and maximums, right? So we can find the highest salary within each department. If I went back to my earlier query we were playing with, the lowest salary in the department, for example, right? And so on and so forth. You can even calculate how much money is left over in the budget and how many employees based on the average salary within the department should you be able to hire. Things like that. So you can get really weird and wonky if you want as you go along. Okay, so now we've introduced grouping. When we do filtering, right, we've filtered so far with the where clause. But remember our discussion earlier, the where clause examines each candidate row, each record, right, applies the Boolean expression. If it's true, it gets put in the output. False, it doesn't. But what if we want to now also filter by something that isn't a property of an individual row or record? It's a property of a group, right? So, for example, as shown here, having a count more than 2, right? So all the departments that have more than 2 employees in them only show them in the output list. How would we do that? Well, that introduces the having line, right? Having is like where. We pass it a Boolean expression. Something will be true or false. But having focuses on properties of a group as opposed to individual records, right? So let me go back to this earlier example here. Just the mouse sometimes jumps too much, right? So here, let me just remind ourselves what we have. Sometimes it's easier to work in a blank slate. So I'm just going to grab this little query, come over to my new blank one, paste it in. Okay? All right, so let's just refresh our memory here. So what we have is grouped by department, right? We're seeing the name and the budget, a count of how many employees there are, and the total salary of the employees within the department. That's what we built earlier. Now, if we, kind of like that PowerPoint slide said, well, what if I only want to show departments with, I don't know, 2 or more people, right? I can't do that with the where clause because that's something that is a property of each group, in this case, grouping by department. So where won't do the job, but after group by, I can say having. Having, so I basically, almost always you'll see some aggregate function used here. Having the count, if I want, I could just use this same expression from up here. I don't know, do I want greater than or equal to 2? And then this will just show me departments where there's at least 2 employees, right? If I wanted it to be more than 2, I could just say greater than. Okay, 6 of one, half dozen the other as far as that goes. I'm just going to rearrange things on the screen here a little bit. Okay, so let me execute that. And then we see the results. We've eliminated any departments that don't have more than 2 people, right? If I put the equal sign back in, then the results don't change because there's nobody with 2. Let's go to 3, right? Greater than or equal to 3 didn't change because 3 was the magic number. If I say greater than 3, then only 1 will be left. Okay, there's only one department that has more than 3 employees. Huge amounts of sample data we're working with here. I know it's kind of Mickey Mouse, right? Trivial examples, but the point is the same. No matter how many rows we have, it works exactly the same way. So that's really what having does. So we could do even more. Let's, and by the way, of course, as always, you can just select what you want. Leave out the having restriction for now. So I see all the data again based on the rest of the query. Well, let's do another one. So let's say having the total employee burden for the department more than $100,000, right? That's our question. We want to see this information as shown, but only for departments that their payroll for all their employees for the department is more than $100,000, right? So all it is a matter of changing this. How do we compare? Well, we have to use the actual function. I can't, it's not like order by where I can use the aliases. I have to use the actual expressions. So the sum of employee salary is greater than, I'll just leave it as greater than 100,000. And this should narrow it down. I think only 2 out of the 3 departments qualify for this further restriction. Right? There we go. So only the departments are included in the output having a total salary burden greater than 100,000. So the challenge for students usually learning this is, okay, this is so much like the where clause and works in such a similar way to the where clause, right? How do I distinguish when to use where and when to use having? And basically it comes down to, is this the property that you want to use for filtering based on, is it a property of a group or of an individual record, right? If it's a property of the group, then you can only do it in the having clause. Okay. So, average salary for each department. Oh, we did it already, sorry. Put the department code in the output. Which department has an average salary greater than $65,000? All right. So that would be similar to our example we just did. Only used 100,000. Oh no, average salary of the department. Okay, so yeah, that's a little different. So let's come back here. So let's answer that one next. So we're trying to find, I might as well leave the same information there for the department, where the average salary is greater than 65,000. Well,
Did you say 250,000 or no?
it was 65,000, I think. Actually, I can see the other slide. I have the other screen turned off, but there we go. So to answer that question, it's just having the average salary, right? There we go. The information systems. That's the only one where the average employee salary is more than 65,000. Okay. So that's basically all the new commands that are needed to do the Lab 2 Data Manipulation Language Lab. Right? Any questions about that?